In Afghanistan, the Taliban has taken two more major prizes as their advance accelerates. This map shows how well the Islamists' offensive has been going. Areas they control are marked in red. In the past day, they have seized the second and the third largest cities of the country, Kandahar and Herat. The embattled government controls only the capital, Kabul, and the areas marked in blue. And both sides are still fighting over the areas marked in yellow. There are growing fears that the whole of Afghanistan could fall to the Taliban within a matter of weeks.
Surveying a city now under their control. In Herat, Taliban fighters stand proudly atop vehicles once belonging to the Afghan army. Now they are in the hands of the insurgents, just like much of the country itself. The Taliban flag is now flying in the western Afghan city and other regional capitals as government resistance melts away. The victors boasted their spoils in videos like this one.
Hello viewers, this is the Herat police headquarters. You can see all the new vehicles here. Dear viewers, we are the victorious Mujahideen who captured the provincial police headquarters.
And similar scenes in Kandahar. This Taliban video purports to show the tail lights of retreating vehicles and a deserted government compound after the insurgents seized Afghanistan's second largest city. Some residents are welcoming the hardline Islamists. Others are scrambling to escape, fearful of the fighting and of life under a repressive regime. Also on the move, United States Embassy staff. The US is sending 3,000 troops to Kabul, not to join the battle, but to extract diplomats and their Afghan aides.
This is not abandonment. This is not an evacuation. This is not the wholesale withdrawal. What this is a reduction in the size of our civilian footprint. This is a drawdown.
Little comfort for the growing number of internal refugees sheltering in this Kabul park. They're angry at their government for its lackluster defense.
When the Americans left our country, this disaster started. I'm not blaming the Americans, but Afghani President Ashraf Ghani. Because when the Americans left, the destruction of our country started.
A humanitarian catastrophe is building. The UN is warning 1 in 3 Afghanis already have difficulty accessing food. With the Taliban closing in on the capital, there's no sign of relief for the vulnerable.
Well, for more on this, let's bring in journalist Bilal Sawari in Kabul. Bilal, the Taliban victories in the big cities of Kandahar and Herat seem to have them further emboldened. Why aren't local militias not having more success against them?
Well, it's a demoralizing trend. The massive surrender of Afghan National Security Forces, first in a district village level, started when the Taliban were able to take over more than 200 district centers across the country, most of them in the provinces of Kunduz and Badakhshan and elsewhere, without a fight, even without a single shot being fired. I think that was the start, and then it started crumbling. There are many reasons. Number one, many people were tired on the battlefield. They had fatigue issues. They had not had rotations. Their living conditions were not good. And they realized, well, the Americans are gone. Why should we be fighting? So people sort of took insurance at a village district level. And the Taliban also created a strategy under which they went to people and said, if you don't fight with us, if you don't put a resistance, we will not bother you. At the moment that I'm speaking to you, we have confirmation that the governor of Logar province, Qayyum Rahimi, has been taken captive by the Taliban after there were heavy fightings in the provincial capital of Pul Alam, outside of Kabul, an hour away. This is the province that is the home province of President Ashraf Ghani. The governor who has been taken captive happens to be the brother of Abdul Salam Rahimi, who is a chief negotiator for Afghanistan in Doha. So as this fighting continues, as these attacks continue inside major provincial capitals, so does the issue of mistrust gets bigger and bigger, especially when family members and relatives and friends of both sides are either killed, captured or displaced.
Well, you are in Kabul right now. How scared are people in the city and all the refugees there that the city could soon fall?
Definitely, these events unfolding in real quick time, and there's a lot of complex local dynamics have created a climate of fear among people. People are quite simply perplexed, thinking, what if anything the government might have as a strategy to stop this? What we also know in the province of Herat, very, very confusing chain of events where Ismail Khan, until yesterday fighting against the Taliban, was taken captive, along with the deputy interior minister in charge for security, along with the provincial intelligence chief, police chief, and the governor of Herat province. What we understand at the moment that the Taliban walked into the regional army base, the 207 Zafar Corps, and they had elders with them. They came as guests, drinking cups of tea, and they took away these senior, Afghan officials who were until yesterday leading, resistance against the Taliban. So there are many questions. How many people might have had deals with the Taliban, what sort of deals, and how many more actually. And the Afghan government was never aware of it, that officials at the highest echelons of its own government were perhaps in touch with the Taliban, about a possible deal.
Bilal Sabari there in Kabul for us. Thank you. I'm now joined by Victoria Fontaine, a professor of conflict studies at the American University of Afghanistan. US intelligence seems to suggest that the Taliban could attack the city within weeks. What does that mean for the Afghan people who've worked for you and other Western organizations?
Well, there is a new visa process that has been put in place by the State Department. It's called Priority Number 2, and so many of our colleagues are going to be putting their names down for it and initiating the process, of course, in full anticipation of it working out for them. But there is also many who have already relocated in neighboring countries. However, the visa process in neighboring countries has shut down in the past 48 to 24 hours, and so they are finding less and less options to flee Afghanistan.
Now, where are the Afghan government and the army in all of this? The army appears in disarray.
Absolutely. Some of our colleagues have received phone calls from Kandahar saying that the army was just told to leave. It's very difficult to verify, but in many sense, the army was already exhausted even before the peace talks started in Doha. We are talking about an army that has been fighting for 40 years. Of course, service members committed to their country, but at the same time, they haven't been paid for months. They haven't been resupplied. And there is, of course, very little morale among them because of the speed at which the Taliban advances have been gaining new territory. And I guess that this war has been won, I would say, mostly psychologically from the start than sometimes militarily, because most of the provinces that were gathered by the Taliban at the beginning were empty provinces, and then the numbers started to rise and the morale started to plummet in the Afghan security forces.
So one of the groups impacted most by the advance of the Taliban is, of course, women and girls. What is their situation right now in the cities and areas taken over by the Taliban already?
Well, some of my students are trapped in their homes in Herat since yesterday. Others have had their families, members of their families killed in Kandahar, close members, and they're really worried. They're apprehensive about their future, about their capacity to continue studying, to continue being part of society. And for them, it's a really difficult time because they feel that and they fear that Afghanistan is being set back for many years to come, maybe 10, 15 years. And so the morale is really low amongst women, and also they feel completely let down and disenfranchised, because if we remember the narrative for getting into Afghanistan in 2001 was helping women and so-called liberating women, and so far this has not necessarily materialized on the long run, and they feel let down.
Victoria Fontaine there from the American University in Afghanistan, joining us from Kabul. Thank you.
With us in studio is Saad Mohseni. He's the director of the Mobi Group, the largest media company in Afghanistan. Saad, thank you for being with us this morning. How concerned are you watching these images that we've just seen?
I'm deeply concerned and have been for some months. But how quickly this is unraveling is a thing that, and we have no control in terms of managing the crises. What to do with our journalists? What to do with our operations? So it's the sort of stuff that keeps us up and has done so for the last few nights.
Why do you think the situation is unraveling so quickly?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. I mean, first and foremost, and I think we have to always look within, we have a pretty inept, hopeless government that has not managed this transition. But also the Americans have completely failed their Afghan partners. The way that this transition was managed, the fact that the Americans decided to leave and left within 3 months, so basically will leave within 3 or 4 months, and not handing over to the Afghans the things that are necessary for the Afghans to keep up the fight. For example, the servicing and maintenance of aircraft, planning for the war, training, logistics. They're pretty much, it's in effect, they've tied the Afghans' hands behind their backs and have said, go and keep fighting. So it's a combination of factors.
You mentioned journalists. You actually launched your own media company after the Taliban were originally removed from power in 2001. How concerned are you about the situation of the ability, rather, of journalists and media to work with the Taliban seizing power in so many places at the moment?
I doubt that they could work with the Taliban in charge. I mean, we've seen right across the country in terms of how they're treating journalists, media operations, and the signs are not good. I mean, I think what we need to point out is Taliban 2.0 is exactly the same as the earlier version. They have not changed. Not when it comes to women, not when it comes to media, not when it comes to civil society. You've seen these people on your screens. I mean, they do not look like a civilized, disciplined group of individuals.
So that means all the gains that have been made for women and girls, they will be rolled back?
Well, more than likely, yes.
What does that mean for women and girls living in the areas that the Taliban has seized?
Well, they will live like they did in the 1990s. Women will not be able to go out without a male companion. Girls will not be allowed to go to school. They will not be allowed to work. They will not be allowed to even go to a clinic unless they're accompanied by a male relative. And I'm not even sure that in clinics, for example, or schools, that women can teach, and because there'll be no female teachers and doctors, a lot of women will not be able to even get basic medical help. So it's of deep concern to us. I'm not sure if it's really the penny has dropped in a lot of Western countries, and particularly in Germany.
Well, you mentioned Germany. You are here today to speak to German government officials about the situation in Afghanistan. What are you going to tell them?
What I'm going to say is that you're going to, the consequences will be felt in places as far as Germany with refugees. For example, they expect 1.5 to 2 million Afghans to leave Afghanistan in 2021. That's an estimate, but it could be a lot higher. Where will they go? They'll come to Europe. They'll go attempt to get to the US. They'll flee to regional countries like Iran and Pakistan. We will have a massive problem in terms of drugs because it will be a free-for-all in terms of production and smuggling of drugs to places like Europe. And of course, terrorism will continue to remain a challenge for all. You're seeing all these different groups now coming back to Afghanistan, whether it's Al-Qaeda or ISIS or a lot of smaller regional groups, terrorist organizations. So I think it's something that you'll feel you will see the consequences in the months ahead.
So what should the international community do?
I think the international community it has to be a carrot and stick approach. They have to remain very engaged in Afghanistan. They have to make it very clear to this new government that will emerge eventually that, well, at least they should try that the gains of the last 2 decades are not reversed or rolled back. And I think the sticks are that sanctioning individuals within the Taliban, sanctioning people who support the Taliban, including people in the Pakistani military and government, But I think engaging is very important. Not to with the embassy shutting down and the airport perhaps closing down, it's going to be easy just to forget about Afghanistan. Engaging is very important and remaining engaged.
Thank you for sharing that message with us today, Saad Mohseni.